Chapter 28. Intelligent and quick-thinking persons can overcome the trickiest of situations in life. Arcapriya Bhowmick. It was time to find another library. I liked libraries as they had a bit of integrity with connecting to the net situation. And I wouldn't use the Wi-Fi. I'd use an actual computer that was connected via NBN. I needed to book and pay for a campground site in Urangabilly. Trying to free camp was not wise. Also, if someone wanted to know where I last was, there was a record of me paying for 3 nights at that campground. I always had to consider that I may become a missing person. So relaxing. The library woman was so lovely. I wished I could live in a world populated only by women. Imagine that. Utopia. Bitches like Billy would disagree. I even wondered if she was actually gay, I swear. Anyway, I found a computer and made the booking. As I was leaving, another fucking curry cell, probably one who worked in the IT for the council, showed up to look around the library computers. He was eyeing one that I hadn't been on. It wouldn't take him long to work out which one I'd used. Everyone was being told to make me, so this made sense. I should have just gone to a different campground. I drove for a few hours from Bogan Town and located Urangabilly. Well, one part of it. The information centre had the absolute nicest young male park ranger. I realised why he was so nice to me. He didn't have phone reception. Okay, so women only and some men like this with no access to phones. He was really natural. It was so refreshing. There were beautiful old buildings at this site that had accommodation, but it was hellishly pricey, like $300 a night. It wasn't flash, it was just that they could accommodate a whole family in one room. And the building was historic, so there was that. I asked him where the campground was and he explained that it was about a half hour up the road. I decided to make the long walk down to the thermal pool while I was here. This place felt safe. There was a couple down there who were canoodling. I didn't know why this was, but I suddenly missed intimacy. Remember that every male is eventually some woman's pain in the ass. I'd read a meme like that featured a beautiful woman. Remember that she's some guy's pain in the ass. The opposite was more commonly true. Every woman I knew had their own pain in the ass that they couldn't leave. And these fucking super dorks hated me for not having my own pain in the ass. Playing house and staying out of trouble was what they expected from all women. They were going to the trouble of punishing me for rejecting this woeful lie. The couple got up and left as soon as I went to plunge into the pool, probably having an affair. A couple of young women came down next. We all looked into the bottom of the thermal pools. They grow their own moss and shit as they aren't chlorinated, but this one looked spooky, like the day of the Triffids was happening all over the walls of the floor of the pool. I'd hate to touch it with my foot. I was so nervous to get in. We all made that observation. I quickly swam the length of the pool and positioned myself on a moss-free bench in the shallow end. There wasn't a great deal of thermal happening and I had to get out to sit in the sun for a bit. The girls started taking pics of each other. I didn't notice if I was in the background of them. I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't know since there was no reception. I decided to cut out anyway. It was a long sloping road and the ranger had warned me that it's hard going climbing back up it. I was feeling weak, so I decided the quicker I got this over the better. I hadn't eaten as usual. Ironically, I would have lost a fair bit of weight since Dingleford, even though the last thing I wanted was my beautiful lean and muscly body back. I didn't want to be attracted to males. Never. No more. As I neared the top, about 15 people were coming towards me, all ages, sizes and cultures. What the hell? They were friendly as they passed, so I figured it was nothing. It was a Friday anyway. People were probably checking into the historic accommodation for the weekend. They could have been Christians on a retreat or something. That was something that I considered, ironically. I'm no fan of organised religion, but I wondered if being religious would prevent people from participating in the human Pokemon game. Sure, there'd be broke tragics who'd rationalise it in that way that Christians lie to themselves. I'd certainly not received any mercy from the devout Jews and muzzos. I hoped the religion I'd been brought up in, the least offensive of the Christian religions, Anglican, was on my side. I doubted those big commercial religions like Hillsong would prevent its members from acting in a gross and greedy way. They were, after all, greedy religions. And I failed to mention the weird cults here, but they positively lived for my persecution. Probably crucifixion, if truth be told. And while we're truth-telling, the Urango Billy campground was a little unsettling. There was an old house in the middle of it, left over from ranger or just hiker days, and it had the type of vegetation that survives snow. No trees and extremely green grass that looked good enough to roll around in. That was all topped off with a tiny, icy stream. This all sounds picturesque, but the roadway over the stream sat up quite high, so it felt like I was under a city bridge with cars, mostly four-wheel drive Land Cruisers, in which the no doubt male driver was punishing his gearbox by not changing up a gear when he should, whizzing past. I couldn't take the far campsites as there were other campers, and it would have looked like I purposely took a posse next to them. At least there were other campers. If I was alone, then no dice. I would have left. I didn't want to check out and make an inventory of all the campers, but I couldn't help it. It's automatic. A couple came up in the far corner in a Hi-Ace, and I think they were both wearing the same shade of beige. This threw me back to the Don Muang airport and all the cultists. There was a nice older couple with a car pop-up who looked like they were weekenders, not travellers. They waved to me as I went to the toilet. Great. Normality. There were people in the area that was accessed from under the bridge. They had a whole big setup, several cars and tents. I saw a male walking to the toilet with a toddler. Surely they wouldn't be up for kidnapping with an actual kid in tow. There were two middle-aged women from this campsite that also walked under the bridge to the toilet at times. They were weird. Neither of them looked at me. Both wore matching shirts. They could be sus, but I didn't want to entertain whatever matching shirted middle-aged women could do to me. Hopefully they were just committing a gay woman crime of fashion. I spent most of my first day huddled up near or in my van. The weather was fantastic to be living out in the open. I ate some beans and snacked. My appetite was back in this cold weather and after the huge walk I'd done at the thermal pools. This is all I asked for. It's not too much to ask. I slept peacefully that night, despite fuckheads with an issue with using the correct gear, speeding across the bridge. They could have been coming to ping me. They didn't stop, so there was that. When I woke in the morning, there were two red, older model Nissan Patrols with rooftop tents parked in a campground near me. They'd arrived in the night and I hadn't even heard them. Spooky. They were all still in bed and I really wanted to see who they were. White, skip males drove vehicles like this and also matched their vehicles with their boyfriends because they didn't have the imagination to choose their own vehicle. I sat in the sunshine drinking coffee and warming up. When it was time for nature to call, I walked past them to the toilet. They were up by now and I was half wrong. There was a white young skip male, but he was accompanied by two women. As I walked past them, they didn't acknowledge me or wave. This was sus. I know sometimes city people don't acknowledge others when they're in the country, as they're used to being unnecessarily careful with eye contact, etc. But these kids look like bushies. It really blows my mind that if they were here for nefarious reasons, be friendly to me. It's a way to gain my trust if you plan on kidnapping me. I again wondered how bad the propaganda was about me. Or the truth. I was outspokenly feminist in chat threads on Insta. Maybe this skip male had some child custody problems. Same goes for the weirdos camped up on the other side of the bridge. Solo male looking after a toddler. Could have been a divorced dad. I put it all out of my mind. I wondered how this patrol trio could nab me. Someone had to drive my van. There were enough of them to carry this off. I believed that whoever kidnapped me would take my van too, so it looked like I was still alive and tripping around, or living somewhere. Even if I did text my parents regularly, they could easily seize my phone, make me open it, force me to take off the biometric passcode and have an open phone to do all sorts of shit. So far, no one had hacked my bank, but this would be the obvious next step, particularly since I had a lot of savings sitting in a stock trading account, just earning interest. Savings is the wrong word. I'd stashed quite a bit away on both of my recent van and truck driving jobs, but the bulk of it was guilt money from my family. I treated it like I used to treat any money given to me by my mother when I was younger. I sat on it like a hen on a nest, not game to spend it in case my mother decided to never give me any money ever again as some kind of control measure. So I was a rich bitch via the bank of mum and dad, but it meant the sacrifice of a normal, healthy relationship with them and my brothers also. I probably would have swapped the cash for a good relationship with my family, but they weren't going to put in an effort for that, so I'd take the cash instead. Back to the most important priority, saving my body. As I was washing dishes in the stream, my van keys fell out into the water. It was shallow enough to retrieve them, but I was worried about using the remote feature as it could rust it. I took it apart to dry it out. Once I'd done that, I was left with the casing shell, no buttons, and a manual key to open doors with the door locks. This van sucks in that it has one key lock on the driver door and one on the back barn doors. So you can lock the whole thing from the driver lock, but you have to unlock the side sliding door by pushing an unlock button in the cab. I was standing out the back of my van using the key in the door lock and on full view of the patrol trio. The male was watching me. As he spied me unlocking the back door with the key, the already hairy eyeball he had on turned to something way more sinister. This cunt was pissed off that I wasn't using central locking. This I knew without getting any concrete evidence. It was vibes, but it gave me another safety measure to start obeying. It was incredibly rare for car thieves to go to the trouble of accessing your remote codes. There was real money being spent on hunting me though, so I had no problems believing that somehow my remote codes had been skimmed and were available over the dark web or however they did it. I set about working out a way that I could lock myself into my van without the remote button on the key. I'd always use the remote lock button once inside. There were no manual locks on any doors in this European thing. Damn it. Cost savings by Iveco. The model before this that I used to own had key locks on all the doors. This wouldn't have enabled me to lock myself in though. I finally worked it out. I'd lock the driver door, thus locking every other door. Then I'd unlock the back door, climb through the van, this was an obstacle course, open the sliding door, jump out, come back around to the back door and key lock it with the sliding door still open. This meant that every other door was locked but the sliding door wasn't. Not acceptable. I found my bike chain with a combination lock and used this to chain the sliding door shut by looping it through the sliding mechanism and through the handle on the inner van wall. It was extremely dangerous if my van happened to catch a light. I could no longer open the back doors from the inside. The mechanisms were worn and fucked. I even hung a pair of chemist's reading glasses on the wall handle so I could quickly see and open the combination. I fully congratulated myself on the chain being the right size to fit around the sliding mechanism. Phew, I was safe. Sucked in, bogans. They left mid-morning and didn't return that night. I wasn't out of the woods though, because they left a pop-up toilet tent in its bag on the accompanying campsite picnic table. This signaled to other campers that the site was taken and they were returning. Damn. I should have just left, but that afternoon an RV with a couple of grey nomads in there arrived. These ones are usually trustworthy, so I decided to stay. I really wanted to go talk to them. I usually didn't seek out grey nomad couples to talk to, as apart from us both being travellers, I didn't have a lot in common with them. They were sitting out my side of their RV as I padded across the green carpet to go to the loo. I greeted them as I went past and they hooked me in for a chat. Another reason I avoid chats with grey nomad couples is they can sure chat up a storm. I guess it's from only having each other to talk to, mostly, if they can't snag another couple or solo like me for a chat. I was too valuable to them, as I actually listened and didn't just counter each of their stories with my own, like I'd observed on so many grey nomad couples. They were itching to be heard, not to listen. They predictably cornered me in a chat with the woman doing all the talking. We went through the cursories of where we're from and how long we've been on the road. The woman was interesting, a retired nurse who used to do contract work while travelling around. I got the impression that the boomer male didn't travel with her. He was looking me up and down and liking what he saw. Maybe he was just a sleaze. They both came from different places in New South Wales, so maybe they'd only come into coupledom while she was travelling around. The next part of the conversation really unseated me. It was like she knew my life. Everyone else seemed to, for the wrong reasons, so my hackles went up. You should try getting work with grain company that I worked at in Dingleford. I did a season with them and I became a loader driver. She acted on and on about how driving loader was the best job. I was becoming more depressed as she spoke. The dork had given us all crash courses on the loader at Dingleford, but I doubted I'd be allowed to drive it all the time. I'd been prevented from working there, full stop. Was this chatty bitch trying to rub it in? I know it's an overreaction to call her a bitch, but she did something later that earned her the title. I didn't bother telling her about my grain job experience with that company. A, I figured she already knew, that's why she was rubbing it in, and B, I couldn't get a word in edgewise to tell her about my life. The fact that she knew I needed a job was sus too. I tried to get myself out of there. I was on the way to the loo, so I better keep going. This woman spat out a sarcastic sound that was not the reaction of a nice person. She probably knew all about the IBA footage as well. He certainly looked like he might. I was relieved to take my leave from them. I wondered if I had to worry about them. They seemed too old to kidnap me. They were probably human Pokemon players. She, a broke bitch, and he just tagging along. I'll bet she hated that her boyf was looking at IBA footage of me, even if it was part and parcel of the propaganda used against me to make Joe public nobodies like them want to participate in such a cruel game. I went for a bit of an explore over the other side of the stream, a bushwalk where there was actual scrub and trees. These weren't affected by any snowfall that had happened months before in June, July. I even found a hidey hole and decided to take a bush shit. Yes, that's TMI, but it's honestly one of the simple pleasures in life, and so good for your bowels. I needed any simple pleasures in life that I could find. I even found a spot to walk across the stream instead of walking back over the bridge, a move I had to time while there were no speeding Land Cruisers, who probably would have run over me while the skip fuckwits inside looked at their phone screens. There were a couple of sus males walking around the joint too. They seemed to have a family. One was staggering along with a beer can. The other in a cowboy hat was drinking too but wasn't staggering. They went over to the big camp on the other side of the bridge. They seemed to wander around among those people, though not speaking to them. I eventually realized that they were looking for firewood. Thank goddess, I didn't need the extra stress after I realized that I had to avoid my no longer nice neighbours. I ate something savoury, filled up further on the bag of cherries I'd bought on the side of the road. I was munching my way through a cherry pie that I'd bought there also. So good. It didn't taste as good as it should have though. Hyper-alertness will do that to you. I really didn't know if I'd made the right decision staying here. I locked myself in with my bicycle chain and hit the hay early.